I met the subject in a small fish and chip shop in Kimru. The shop is adorned with newspaper articles from the last 100 years. All of them have one thing in common. They are reports of people who went missing on the Hibernia highway. The only one who was ever found is the subject sitting across from me. The booth she sits in has her article directly behind her as she reads it, frowning to herself. Evelyn Frey is barely in her mid-30s, and even though she is not married, she wears a prominent golden ring on a golden chain around her neck. The ring is clearly too large for her to wear, but she cannot let it go. The ring, as far as I can tell, is a simple engagement ring. There is no jewel, no engraving. The ring looks like any 10 carats ring that can be purchased at a Mogo Mart. Her necklace is even cheaper quality, with the green on her neck indicating the golden necklace was a lot more copper than gold. Still, knowing Evelyn's story, her 100 centi jewelry are her most valuable curios. Some powerful curios aren't created by curses, magic, science, or even power. Sometimes the only thing that makes an object special is the history associated with the items, or the lack of a history of the item. While we wait for our fried fish and potatoes, we talk briefly about our jewelry before Evelyn gets comfortable enough to share her story with me. I see that she often twirls her hair and she often flinches at random times, like she can hear something that no one else can hear. As she gets nervous, she fiddles with her necklace and her ring more and more. A few times I have to assure her that she is safe here in this shop. Trust has to be built gradually. When you survive a traumatic event, it's hard to ever feel safe again. Even surviving mundane or explainable events, survivors can struggle to feel safe. Surviving a supernatural event feels incredibly unsafe. When you get chased by something that cannot be explained, the rational world can feel inherently unsafe. So you take comfort and protection where you can, and you may find it impossible to trust anyone ever again. Just this interview is a big step for Evelyn, both in her ability to trust and her ability to heal from what stalked her and her boyfriend that night, 16 years ago. I was a young woman back then. My boyfriend, Adam, was working full time. I was going to school and we had been dating for 6 years. We were 16 when we started dating, and he was working full time already to take care of a family of six. By the time he turned to 19, he was the last one in his family. More casualties of the Albion crisis. He was grieving and he needed time to heal, and I was now providing for us both emotionally, and he moved in with me in my dorm where I thought he would be safe. For 3 years, I held him each night while he cried. I reminded him that I was there, and during the day, when he wasn't working, he was helping me with my classes. Even though he had a ninth grade education, he was surprisingly clever, and it was nice explaining my classes to someone. When we were both 22, we felt like life was finally turning for the better. His bad nights were few and far between. I was only a few classes away from graduating, and he would focus on his education when I could afford to pay for us both. We had a future, and with a brief break between my classes, I suggested we go to Hibernia for a few days off, and he agreed. I don't think he knew why I chose Hibernia and why I chose February for our little vacation. I was planning on proposing to him on February 29th. I had a whole plan. We were going to visit some relatives of mine. He would be surrounded by his new family when I proposed, and he would have a chance to have a family again. Although we wouldn't be able to even think about a wedding until we both graduated, I wanted to give us something beautiful to look forward to. When you spend years just struggling to shake off the past, the future doesn't feel real. but I would help him feel real with a future, just like how he helped me feel real during my years in college. That was the plan, but that wasn't what happened. Trip to Hibernia took longer than expected. The ferry was 3 hours late, and we weren't going to arrive in the village where my family lived until well after sunset. Still, Adam and I had fun, enjoying the strangely curvy highways that felt like we were on the sea, and I felt confident with the ring in my pocket. A cheap little engagement ring I got from a thrift store, but one I was sure he would love. As the sun kept getting lower, we stopped at a petrol station that was 30 minutes from the village, and it was there that things got strange. The petrol station was some no-name shitty petrol station beyond the edge of any town. A station that provided gas and a very small general store that stood across from an old inn that looked like it was where St. Patrick stayed when he chased the snakes out of Hibernia. So, while Adam pumped the petrol into the car, I went into the small store to see if they had drinks for the last 30 minutes on the ride. The sun was setting when I went into the shop. The shopkeeper was a very elderly woman who sat in a rocking chair behind a register, rocking slowly back and forth as I looked over the freezers for something to drink. Grabbing a few different fizzes, I went to the register where I laid the fizzes in front of the old woman, who didn't even bother scanning nor typing in the products in her register before she called out the price. 20 punt, she screeched. Her white hair was in a braid so long that it was halfway down her back, and her dress looked like something from over a century ago, and it was white and untouched by any dirt nor blemish. She was practically ethereal in her movement. Despite her age, she moved with ease, and she seemed more focused, far away, than right here. 20 punt for 2 drinks seems pricey, I told her, my purse clutched tight as she reached out her hand for my coins. 20 punt could afford a meal for 2 in a decent restaurant. I doubt the drinks would cost more than a punt each. The woman kept her hand out. The punt are for the petrol and the drinks, she said, flexing her fingers again as I pulled out the bills to pay for the drinks. As she counted the bills and she smiled at my money, like she was a hungry woman and she was going to devour the bills in my hand before, or she glanced up at me and then outside. She tilted her head before she asked, "Wait, you're not staying at the inn? Are you traveling tonight?" she asked, a tinge of fear in her voice. "Oh, we are trying to get to Roundstone. You should get there in about 30 minutes," I told her with a smile as I tried to be polite with this now creepy woman who laid the crowns in front of her. "Love, these roads are dangerous at night. Even with Roundstone so close, you won't make it safely. Please, just stay in the inn tonight. You can leave at first light," the woman offered as I shook my head and I stepped back. "Sorry, no, I appreciate your concern, but we will be fine. We have friends who are expecting us there tonight. There's a phone in the inn. Please, just stay there for tonight. We will host you for free. We will provide you with breakfast tomorrow morning. Please, let us host you both tonight," the woman pleaded, even standing from her rocking chair as she reached out her hands to me, like she wanted to grab me and keep me trapped in the store. "No, thank you, ma'am. We need to get to Roundstone," I told her as I backed away from her, and she still followed me. Even when I went outside, she followed me, cupping her hands around the bills as she offered the bills to me, while I ran to the car with my boyfriend. We have to go right now," I told Adam as he glanced towards the old woman, who was screaming so loud I could clearly hear her voice inside the car. As Adam quickly got in the car and we began to drive off, and we could hear the old woman screaming as she threw the bills at the car. The Fays stalk the roads at night. He'll find you. Gromdolf is hungry, and he will feed, she yelled while we drove away. And when I was certain she was no longer there, I asked Adam, Gromdolf, do you think that was her dog or something? I asked with a nervous chuckle. And Adam tried to laugh it off, but I could tell that he was unsettled by what she said. He wasn't normally nervous, but I knew his family worshipped Fae, and he had a few little superstitions, like leaving out food for unseen guests, or how he refused to carry a key in his hands when near a crossroads. So maybe the old crone's words bothered him more than they did me. The crooked one, or the black one. I know that much, but I don't know what else it could mean, he said as the sun finally set and the last bit of the sunlight flashed green as the last of the light died across the Hibernian landscape. The sun now fully set, the headlights came on, and we drove through those dark, winding roads. Hibernia was, and still is, a country that would completely redesign their highways to avoid fairy circles. Even in the modern world, the country did not want to disturb the mythical fae. At that moment, I wasn't thinking about fae, myths, nor anything like that. I was just thinking about the ring in my front pocket, and the fact the love of my life was to my side. As we quietly continued on our way to Roundstone, and the sky got darker still, I tried playing something on the radio, but nothing came on the radio at all. The radio scanned the frequencies for something to listen to, and nothing came on. Not even those obscure civilian radio stations that talk politics or personal stories. I didn't know when the writer appeared behind us, but I remember seeing the light behind us. A single high beam was on as it got closer and closer, making it harder to see the road ahead of me. Thinking it was a normal passerby, I pulled closer to the left to give the bright light a chance to pull ahead of us. The biker grew closer, and the high beam was turned off, and the rider was so close that I could see the black motorcycle in the taillight. Our nocturnal follower was dressed in black leather, with golden Celtic knots and crosses stitched across the leather. A very elaborate stitch pattern that would have cost thousands to make, and the noble rider just wore it casually in the night. The motorcycle was harder to see, but it looked expensive and hauntingly beautiful. A deep dark black that seemed to absorb all of the light around it, and between the handlebars there was a skull carved out of steel, a skull that smiled in the night while the kindly guest followed us. The motorcycle got closer and closer as the esteemed follower grabbed the back of the car, and I could feel the car slow down as the motorcycle started to drag us. Floor it, Adam told me. I tried to floor the car to get it to speed up. Instead of speeding up, the car only slowed more and more. Our kind friend was pulling our car to a stop, even as the engine overheated, trying to get us away. And while we were being pulled to a stop, the radio chose that time to start playing, and it wasn't music. It was a voice that belonged to our unexpected guest. Adam was what it said. It just said his name over and over again as the car was finally pulled to a stop and Adam whispered to me, When I say run, run, I'll try to buy you some time, he whispered to me. I tried to argue, but I tried to tell him we could both get away, but instead he kissed me and he whispered, I remember who Kromdolf is. I'm already dead, Evelyn, but you can live, he said as he opened the door, and he walked confidently towards the noble rider, who let go of the bumper he was holding. And as Adam approached the princely one, I opened the door and I grabbed the gun I kept in the glove box as I pointed it at the head of the fellow traveler. Let us go, or I will blow your head off, I told him, and his helmet turned my way. The helmet was unlike the rest of the handsome rider. His motorcycle, his leather jacket, even his pants and boots were all clearly very expensive and well cared for. His helmet was beaten up, scratched, and old, like something kept in the bottom of a garage for 20 years. The voice in the radio stopped repeating Adam's name, and now only played static. But I could see fear in Adam's face. His face was full of acceptance when he left the car, but in that moment, he was scared for me. The radio in the car then began to laugh. A noble, esteemed, wonderful laugh that filled me with emotion and with such awe that my entire body shook in awe of this noble friend. My finger tightened around the trigger, and the bullet found its mark in the center of the noble rider's helmet. The helmet fell off of his shoulders, revealing beneath that he had no head under his helmet. He had the remnants of a neck that expanded and contracted with every breath. The wound of the fair neck did not bleed, but he lacked injury, and the laughter on the radio only got louder as now I aimed my gun at the fair figure's chest, squeezing the trigger 3 times. Each bullet hit the chest, but left no wound and no mark on the clothing. The fair prince was untouched by my mortal weapon, and he knew that I was watching him as the kingly voice on the radio instructed me. Watch, he said as Adam yelled at me to run, but fear kept me stuck in my spot as the mighty man reached out with his arms that were longer than I expected as the fine leather glove gripped my boyfriend's throat with incredible force. I watched as my boyfriend was slowly choked out by a single hand that only grew tighter and tighter as the fair rider's grip tightened so much that the skin broke beneath his fingers, and the snap of my boyfriend's vertebrae as the fair folk lifted my boyfriend's severed head and attached spine above his own noble stump. For a dark moment, I thought the ferryman was going to lower my boyfriend's head onto his own severed neck. I wish that was what he did. Instead, what happened was my boyfriend's severed head opened its eyes, and the voice on the radio now spoke with Adam's voice. Run! The radio and Adam's voice said at the same time, while I was still paralyzed in fear. Run! The voice echoed, and I finally began to turn and run away from the fair man and his fair punishment. Run! Adam's voice echoed, so loud it bounced across the countryside, while I ran away from the road, hoping that the proud rider was slower on foot than he was on his deaf coach. Instead, I learned he was quick on foot as well, just as he wanted to hunt me down. As I ran through brambles and briars, across creeks and around cliffs, through winding paths and straight trails. The fair one followed me, closer and closer. Sometimes his grasp was mere centimeters behind me. Sometimes he would step in front of me, so I would scramble to get out of his way. And as I ran, I could not figure out why the sympathetic folk kept me alive, while he immediately killed my husband. However, the noble one's mercy soon ran out when I felt something sharp grab at my foot and pull me down to the ground. I flipped over to see what grabbed me, and I screamed when I saw it. A whip made out of human vertebrae, enough bones for over a dozen men, tied over a whip made out of a dark, strong material, unlike anything I had seen before or since. And it was held by the princely man who pulled me slowly towards himself. The whip of human spine pulled and pulled as I was brought closer, and the noble one produced a one-handed axe behind his back. An axe still dripping in fresh blood from the fair folk's other well-deserved executions. As I was pulled closer and closer, I threw the gun at the kind man, and he did not even react, as it bounced off of him. In a desperate attempt to try and do something, I pulled out the jewelry case that I kept the ring in, and I threw it at the fair folk. I don't know what I was thinking when I did that, but what I did know was when it was thrown, it passed through the fellow traveler like he was made of smoke, and he dissolved into the shadow of the night. When he was gone, so too was the whip, leaving me alone with just myself and the ring that I was going to propose to Adam with in dawn's purifying light. I was found by people from Roundstone who saw my wrecked car and Adam's headless body. I was over 40 kilometers away from the wreck. 40 kilometers away at night. That was how far I was running from the esteemed follower. I traveled all night while he played with his food. He played with me. I shared my story with Roundstone, and they told me about the headless rider who traveled the roads at night. They told me how the fair folk rides his deaf coach, and how he likes to remove the heads of his victims, and how the noble one only feared gold and daylight. How I was actually very lucky he decided to play with me all night instead of killing me immediately. I also learned that whenever he speaks a name, that person will die. Something he only does once per night. Adam must have known about that when he heard his name on the radio. It really was luck that Kromdorf spoke Adam's name first. If he said my name, Adam had no gold on him, and we both would have died, but that doesn't make what happened better. I learned the gold in the ring chased away the headless rider, and I learned his name. I also learned that saying his name, or anything that could offend the kindly one, would act as a summons for him. Ever since that day, I've kept the ring I was going to give Adam to keep myself safe. And while I've not been attacked since then, I have seen Kromdorf since then. Sometimes I am walking home before the sun sets, and for a moment from the corner of my eye I see a headless figure following, only to turn and see nothing there. Or when I am driving, I can hear Adam's voice on the radio, telling me to run. Once I thought I saw him at the foot of my bed, holding Adam's head in one hand, and Adam was telling me to run. only for me to wake up and realize nothing was there. I've tried getting help for this. Therapists and psychiatrists don't believe me when I tell them what happened. They think it's a metaphor for watching my boyfriend die. And while I can talk about that much, they cannot offer me safety from a fellow traveler. And when I try to talk to a priest or a mystic who claims they can protect me from a fair one, but I don't know if the ritual works and they cannot give me someone to talk to. So I now chose to speak to you, dearest friend. When I am done with the interview, I give her some advice from my other sources. At first, she questions my advice. Surely it could not be so simple to keep someone as dangerous as Chrome Duff away from her. She had spent so long keeping the danger away by never addressing it directly, never even using honest words to describe what happened, always using euphemism or words to avoid offending the dark fae who harmed her. Even when I addressed the crooked dark one as the crooked dark one, her eyes expanded like she expected me to burst into flames. Only she saw me left alone. She even asked me if it was the obsidian crystal around my necklace or the keys I wore, only for me to take them both off and lay them on the table. And I call out the name of the one who hurt her. And again, nothing happened to me for a long moment. And Evelyn burst into tears. "What magic do you have to keep fair folk at bay?" she asked me, and I answer, "There is no magic protecting me. They tell you that they can hear you when you call out their name, or if you say an unkind word about them. But if fellow travelers had such power, we wouldn't have a single story about them at all. It is a rumor that they create to keep people fearful and under their power. While there is certainly power in names, you can speak about what happened without fear. As you can see, I am untouched, and I promise you, no one will hurt you." There is silence as she opens her mouth to speak for a moment before closing her mouth. I stay silent, waiting for her to speak as she finally opens her mouth, and for the first time in 16 years, she finally talks about that night with honest words. "I was hurt that night. My boyfriend was murdered. I was hurt by the Dullahan. My boyfriend was murdered by the Dullahan." There is silence in the shop before she finally takes a deep breath, tears falling down her face as she finally realizes that she is free to finally talk, to finally process what happened that night, all without the fear that there would be harsh consequences for just talking about it. For the first time in so long, she can finally think about it without fear for her soul. I offer her a business card for a therapist I know that has dealt with the supernatural before. Just like how, by sharing her story, she helped herself in her healing, I too will now share her story with others to help them heal as well.